My name is Steve Klein. I'm with SPX Recold here in Southern California. I'm the inside sales engineer for the parts and aftermarket area of expertise. I have a mechanical engineering degree background. I spent a lot of years in industrial sales and kind of traveled up and down the West Coast for a lot of power plants, refineries, and wastewater facilities. And going back even further, I have some training with HVAC in terms of vocational schooling and HVAC technical. So I've had a kind of a roundabout experience in HVAC and other industrial applications, and that's a little bit about me. Okay, so here's an overview of what we're going to be going into. We're going to talk about, this is a focus on the fan blower bearings, but we're going to talk some about some general maintenance and inspection areas that you need to focus on. We'll go through, of course, the bearing replacement steps as a general guide. We're going to go over some lubrication discussions about how to properly lubricate and maintain your bearings, and also go over some of the common bearing failure modes so that you can see really what's going on with maybe why your bearings are failing prematurely. Hopefully that's not happening. I'm going to also give you an option here to consider a automatic lubrication option if that suits your fancy. And then we'll go into helping you identify, or at least talk about which parts, since I'm in the parts and aftermarket department, which parts, how do you identify the parts on your tower that you may need to replace? Maybe you don't have any idea, and we can help you out with that. The first thing that you need to do is become familiar with your tower, and that is, of course, identifying your tower model and serial number. So this particular webinar applies to our J series, our JC, JT, and JW towers with the big blower wheel off to the left side there on the picture. But to identify your tower, all of them come with a nameplate right there on the side, circled in red there, and you can see your model and serial number, and of course our phone number here in Recold, and you can identify your tower. We need that information so that we can help identify the correct parts that you'll be needing for your particular tower. If you somehow replace that panel due to age, or it's just weathered and fallen off or become unreadable, we can help you still with that. Hopefully identify the model and serial number of the tower that you have. Now, before we start any kind of inspection work or maintenance work, of course, safety is a very big priority, so we want to make sure that you're going to shut down all the power to the unit. We want to, of course, make sure that you follow all the applicable safety guidelines of your locale, your facility, wearing the proper PPE, following the lockout tagout procedures in your particular facility. So safety first, as always. When it comes to maintenance, we have a general template here, and this is a downloadable form that you can go to spxcooling.com and go to the library section and type in the word checklist, or you can click that link right there, and you can download this maintenance checklist. This kind of covers everything that you should be doing and maintaining on your towers. It's a piece of equipment just like your car or anything else that requires a certain level of maintenance. We'll be focusing on the bearings and lubrication in this particular webinar, but there are other items that you're going to need to pay attention to on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. And so this might come in handy for you to download, print out, and keep in your files so that you can keep a record of it and make sure that you're just doing all the right things, because a properly maintained tower will definitely last you much longer and give you less headaches. All right, yes, the tower should be inspected just visually, generally speaking, once a week. And the bearing lubrication, which is this line here by my cursor, every 3 months, at least to start off with. And I'll go into a little bit more detail as we go along here. But that's at least the starting point, is every 3 months for the bearings and lubrication. So when going and doing a visual inspection, just walking up to the tower and bearing in particular, you want to take a look at the lube lines. Lube lines are a nylon line that goes from the Zerk fitting on the side of the blower and connects to the bearing itself. You'll see that in the photo here coming up next. But you want to just, is it filled with grease? Does it have any empty spots in it? That just gives you an indication of has it been maintained properly? Has grease been filled up regularly? Just an indicator of some sorts. You want to also pay attention to the noise and vibration levels that's coming from the blower and the bearing areas in particular. Do you hear anything unusual? Are you seeing excessive vibration, things like that, which can be an indication that you have a bearing problem. So let's go into the bearing replacement steps here. There's a number of steps, and you'll see over here those lube lines here on my cursor that I mentioned in the prior slide. This is the Zerk fitting where the maintenance person would hook up the grease gun and fill the lube line up, pushes grease through the lube line into the bearing. So the first step here is to remove these blower guards from both sides. You're going to have a blower guard, and over here is the belt guard, the fan shifts, and the lube lines, of course. Now that you have those two parts off, or both sides of the blower cleared and free, gives you access to the bearing itself. And this is a photo of what you might expect to see with all those parts removed. You're going to now loosen the two set screws. These are bearings that have set screws that attach to the shaft. You're going to loosen those with a proper sized Allen wrench. So there's two of them. Yours might be a little dirtied up and greased up and maybe a little bit difficult, so maybe not quite as easy as this photo here taken from the factory where it's all nice and clean. The next step is to remove the mounting bolts. There's two mounting bolts on this pillow block bearing. Just remove them as shown, pretty simple. Now there are a number of ways that you can lift the shaft up. This is the simplest way. It's very easy to do using a simple piece of wood to get under and use the bearing bar as leverage to just provide a little bit of clearance. You can see over here just a little bit of space. You just want to take the weight off of that bearing, get the shaft slightly raised so that you can now use a soft mallet to slowly begin sliding the bearing toward the end of the shaft. Again, you probably will have a tower that might have some grease or debris or something caked up on the end of that shaft or around that bearing, so you may have to use a little bit of force and a little bit of persuasion to get some of that bearing to slide off towards the end of the shaft. That's the way to do it. There are other ways that you can lift this up other than the piece of wood method, but this is for sure a more simpler way to do it. Then you want to take the piece of wood or another piece of wood and you place it underneath the shaft to rest it on the bearing bar surface and continue to slide the old bearing off the shaft. Get your new bearing ready to go. At that time, you want to clean off your shaft surface and also inspect it for damage. Use 120 grit sandpaper or something like that to maybe run over the surface of the shaft to get it cleaned off so you can take a nice visual inspection of the shaft. So next you're going to want to slide your new bearing onto the shaft and onto the bearing support bar. So it's resting on that bearing support bar. And of course you'll remove your piece of wood there. Now you want to make sure that the bearing is centered. For alignment reasons, you have a bearing on either side of the shaft, and the bearings can accept up to 2 degrees of misalignment. So it's pretty important that you measure so that this is centered. So measure from both sides, center the bearing, and then when you go to do the other side, you're going to measure and do the same thing so they're both equal distance and centered and you don't have any misalignment issues. From there, you're just going to reverse the process or basically redo what you just did prior, and now put in the 2 bolts and tighten them up and set the set screws on the bearing collar itself. That's where you first started, so tighten up those 2 set screws. And then you do it to the other side as well. And that is as simple as changing out the bearings. It's that simple. But of course you want to grease them. So lubrication is next. So you want to get in and lubricate. This is a sticker. This particular blue sticker is on our units. We put this on. But if you have that come off or you just forget, it's a mobile lithium grease, SHC 460. It's a synthetic grease or something similar to that is what you want to use to lubricate the bearings. So you lubricate the bearings right when you put them on, and of course every 3 months or prior to a shutdown or after you've done a shutdown, so that the bearings are always lubricated properly. When you do the lubrication, you want to make sure that you fill it until clean grease starts squeezing out of the seals and you can see clean grease coming out. You want to get rid of all of the old grease, and you also want to take that old grease and you want to inspect it. You want to look at it for contamination. You want to look at it for moisture absorption. If you live in a very rainy or humid area, you can get maybe a lot of moisture or excessive moisture into the grease, and that is bad news. And so if you do see a milky or gritty grease coming out of your bearings, that's an indication that you need to grease more often. So shorten your lubrication interval. Instead of 3 months, maybe go to 2 months and see how that changes, and get it to the point where you have relatively clean grease coming out. That's just the best way to do it. So let's look at bearing failures. This information is published by Baldor Dodge. As you can see, if you tally up, starting with liquid contamination, going around the circle here, solid contamination, aged lubricant, unsuitable lubricant, insufficient lubricant, those pie sections amount up to 80%. So bearings fail mostly because of lubrication issues, whether it's insufficient, unsuitable, or contaminated lubricant. So these are the areas that you need to focus on: bearing lubrication being proper, and of course squeezing that old bearing grease out and getting the new grease back into the bearing, and of course examining the old grease to make sure you're not dealing with contaminated grease. So this is the primary reason for your bearings failing. So instead of going around every 3 months or 2 months or what have you to lubricate your bearings, you might be interested in an automatic lubrication option. This is something that Recold offers. We can add this. You see it in this photograph here on the left side, mounted to the side of the blower, and it feeds both bearings with those lube lines connected up. It's a battery-operated device. You don't have to put in new electrical. And it comes with a grease pack that lasts up to 12 months. And you can change the amount that it gets dispensed, anywhere from a half a month to have that grease pouch last up to 12 months. So it's just an easy addition to any of our towers, and gives you more time to do other things from a maintenance perspective. We also have the service packs, the grease packs. It comes with a new 250 cc's of grease, a new battery for the unit, so it operates as a dust cover, and that's something you can keep buying as needed. So consider that if that's something you want to try to take off of your list of maintenance things to do. So now we just switch subjects a little bit, just more generally speaking of, in addition to bearings, but what other parts might you need for your tower? And we can help you with that. If you're unfamiliar with all the parts on the tower, they can be quite complicated and have a lot of parts inside that maybe you can't see too easily, but we have the drawings, and we have these drawings that can help you. I can send you these drawings, and you can circle or highlight or just enumerate on an email which parts you might want to get. So for example, this is just a blow up of one of the areas that you can see all the different parts on there numbered, and then off to the right side over here we have the part descriptions and whatnot. So that's just an easy, convenient way for you to communicate with us or to your local rep what parts you need for your particular tower. And here at Recold, we have all the parts you need. So everything from sheet metal parts such as access doors or your water trough down here or your side panels, pumps, motors, things like that, all of your spray nozzles, eliminators, new copper coils, makeup valves, float valves, and all the mechanical equipment, bearings, sheaves, belts, that kind of thing. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but as part of this series, what we want to do is discuss these items being replaced. So some of the other topics we're going to get into is how to replace a pump assembly, how to deal with the eliminators, doing the eliminator replacements, the makeup valves, how to replace that, and also the copper coils as well. So we're going to try to make this as a useful and informative series for all of you to get something out of and to become more familiar with maintenance and maintaining your towers. So how do you get a parts quote or to order a part? You can go to spxcooling.com and do a rep search. We have reps located throughout the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Just type in either the zip code you're at or your state and city, and you can find the local rep. You can also send me an email, which my email address right there, steve.klein@spx.com. And please provide your tower model and serial number. We like to keep track of which parts are ordered for which towers, and of course, each tower can be slightly different with different parts, different specific things, unique things that are not the same as somebody else's tower. So that model and serial number is very, very important to have. So those are the two ways to get a hold of us and get a parts quote.